Good morning. We have a question to ask you this morning. And it's right up here on the screen, as you can see. What version of you are you modeling? One of the things that we've discovered is that most of us picked up a version of ourselves that we started using. And oftentimes that's a version of ourselves that we didn't choose. Versions of ourselves are often shaped by other people's expectations, other people's fears, other people's thoughts, um, and definitely other people's definitions of what we should be. But the good news is that you can always come back to neutral. Whether or not you think that's possible, it is there. It's coming back to the truth of who you are and deciding what version of you do you want to model with the world. Every Sunday here on Rise and Shine Sundays, we invite a conversation that you can be part of. And I'd like to invite you, if you are watching us on the Breakthrough Show Network, you're more than welcome to put some comments in the chat if you'd like to do that. Or if you're feeling especially frisky and want to model a different version of yourself, you can come right to a website called rsslive.org and join us here in the studio. Either way, this morning's question is, what version of you are you modeling? And joining us in the roundtable this morning are my esteemed colleagues, Ray and Sang. Good morning.
Good morning.
So help me understand, this question grew out of a conversation that we've been having over the past couple of weeks. We talked about walking our integrity. We looked about the judgment that sneaks in, when we're trying to care for people. And last week, of course, we talked about whose opinions are you actually belong in your truth. Now we're kind of coming to this idea of what version of yourself do you want to model in the world? So, saying you're always really good about getting us balanced and set. Would you like to chime in this morning and give us a little bit of a basis to grow from?
Oh, of course. This is such a challenging thing to think about, right? Because you have to think, what am I doing? What am I modeling? And I'm going to say a few things. There are some things that I knew for certain. And one of the things was when I had my children. And when I had my kids, I knew that I wanted to be a certain type of mom, right? I wanted to be a certain type of mom. I wanted to be able to give them certain things and to be able to have conversations with them. And it was very important for me to communicate that with them as they were growing up, at their different stages of life, of their level of understanding. And one of the things that I did is I taught my kids how to have this conversation, how to have a conversation without being disrespectful, right? And one time, the kids would get in the car after their activities and things like that, and I would say, they would literally get in the car and go, "What's for dinner?" And I go, excuse me. I was like, how was your day? How was practice? How was this? How was that? And this goes on for like a week. And finally I said, guys, when you guys get in the car, I do not want you to ask me what's for dinner. That is not like, I get that you want dinner. I was like, but I'm asking you questions. Let's talk about the day and then we'll go into dinner. And so this goes on. Well, then a couple weeks later, I'm on the phone a few times when they get in the car. Well, we had this thing called a family circle. And so one of the things, again, I wanted my kids to be able to communicate. I wanted them to have open communication, honest, where they didn't feel like they were getting reprimanded for something that was actually they're experiencing themselves. And so we have the circle and my kids go, so mom, when we get in the car now, you're on the phone. We don't like that. We want to know about your day. So it was a moment, and it's literally a moment that I practice to this day. As if anybody's getting in my car, I'm hanging up before anybody gets in the car, like anything like that, because it became something that I realized, not that I didn't know my kids were watching, but they're watching, they're learning. Other people are learning from you. If you're at work and you're doing certain things and you keep slacking off, but then you want to get mad at, Nancy over here for slacking off, but you're slacking off. And I think it's that like, what am I doing to help show this is what my behavior looks like, or this is what this looks like. And I think finding that grounds for yourself is always really, really good. It is challenging because there's that outside influence.
Right.
But what is true to you? What do you love? What do you want to do? What is your adventure in life today?
Right. And you know that phrase that is so popular, be the change you want to be in the world, right? Well,
Right.
it's a wonderful way of beginning. And we've talked about the idea of how you can be, but again, what you've invited us to consider and what this conversation is about today is about modeling that, right?
Mhm.
You know, you've done your own discovery work. You've been able to figure out, okay, how I'm going to filter in other people's opinions. Now, what's different about what I'm modeling? If I'm engaging in, oh, Ray, I am just leaping into building
Oh
up
no,
what's saying.
no, I
But
was listening.
I forgot to say, Ray, talk to us. I'm not modeling the correct behavior this morning.
Yes, you are. I love the idea that there again is building on what Sang has shared with us in previous discussions. The pause is to look at how are we in the world, and modeling is just a way to say, well, what do I actually do? How do I want to represent myself? Because sometimes people just haven't stopped and thought about it, and I think it's something as Sang has demonstrated. She opened a conversation with her kids to say, look, what does a respectful discussion or environment look like? So
Mhm.
she shared what her understanding or her view, and the kids got to share with her. Mom, get off the phone if you want to have a conversation. So
Mhm.
so it's a two-way street. It's a
Mhm.
multiple directional thing. So I think that's important because um, quite often we're shaped by our environments. I think to a large extent, um, you get overtaken. In my case, I find that in a lot of situations for work and stuff that I've had in the past, is you immediately go into defensive mode. So you're not modeling your true self. You've put on the armor, so to speak, or the mask or whatever. So that's not you. But now I think we have the opportunity in spaces like this, as well as in discussion with others, is I would have not been able to have this discussion with people 10 years ago, because
Wow.
it's something new. This space didn't exist 10 years ago, and I didn't get the chance of I'll just throw it back to you. But what I find fantastic is being introduced to Sang, being introduced to you is like, wow, where were they 20 years ago in my from my in my life? I would have loved it. But
Yeah.
it would just the environment and this and the timing wasn't, as we've met, and Jamie can elaborate on that, but we met through the mutual desire to be ourselves in a different space.
Yeah, and one of the things you just said hadn't entered my mind when we started this conversation. That was the idea. We talked about the idea of what costume are you wearing, but you used the word mask, right? And
Mhm.
if we are actually talking about what version of ourselves are we modeling, are we still modeling some kind of masked version of ourselves? And that's why a lot of this is shaped by the journey. If you've been able to sort of really do that work of self discovery, where my mind goes was, oh, this is like a canvas. We're inviting people to think of when Sang picks up her kids in the car, it's a blank canvas. What do we want to be able to imprint on that canvas? What do we want to paint into it? What do we want to fill into it? But if we
Mhm.
still haven't done a lot of our internal work, we are going to do the mask and we're going to pretend, right? So there's this really narrow balance beam between, acting as if, right? But it's really, really powerful when what we're inviting for you to consider is what would it be like if you could model behavior based on the truth of who you are? That's that really kind of fine line. Do you understand that distinction, saying, because I know sometimes we've had to put on a front and be who we're not, but oftentimes we are invited to 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 not wear the mask, but to wear the truth of who we are.
Right. It is very challenging because, and what happens if we think about this, if you get around certain people, certain group friends of friend group friend groups, that's what I meant to say, friend groups, they have different discussions. So you have different behaviors in this group. You have different behaviors if you go to another group. It doesn't mean that you aren't who you are. You have adapted to that space. The question becomes, are you still who you are in that group? Are you comfortable doing X, Y, and Z? Are you comfortable having X, Y, and Z conversations? Because perhaps you've realized, and this is where discernment comes in, right? We have all these D's, right? Distinction is learning, am I still being really myself when I go out with this group of friends? Am I still being the same when I go here? Am I still being the same when I go visit my family?
Right.
Right? Because a lot of times that's where a lot of the drama is in a lot of people's families. And so we put on this mask and we pretend to get along and we pretend to do this. And then it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of
It
stress on our
is.
minds
It
and our
is.
bodies. And I think having that, then finding that way to move into discernment to decide perhaps how you want to be in this group and how you want to be in the other group. But again, still being who you are and as they say, true to yourself.
There you go. Well, let me do this. Because there is a moment that is happening here where we want someone to be authentic. Ollie, if you're feeling that one of the things you'd like to model is to hop into a chair with us, there you are, and join in our conversation this morning. And, Ollie, you're in an interesting position today because as Ray was telling us during our pre-gathering, it's the summer solstice. There's all sorts of other changes happening in the world. And you, Ollie, get to be able to decide what the next half century of your life is going to look like. So happy birthday to you, Ollie.
Birthday, Ollie.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you so much. In fact, it's just I receive, and at the same time, you are my gift in my journey. Some for a few days, other for a few weeks or months. Not for probably 1 year, Jamie. We met a bit more than 1 year ago, and it's to realize that each day is a gift, and but of course, I cannot quote unquote erase 50 years of my life. I can just decide what I'm going to live in the next days of the rest of my life. So thank you.
Well, would you be willing to participate in our conversation this morning? Because I have a direct question. One of the things, whenever we get to one of those decade markers in our life, right? I know when I turned 60, I was like, well, what is a 60-year-old supposed to be? And when I turned 90, I was like going, wow, this is really great. I feel really good for 90. But in all seriousness, Ollie, we're talking this morning about what version of you are you modeling? And have you given any thought to, all right, now that I'm entering into a new decade, is there a version of myself that I want to model that is based on what I know about myself up to this point? Is that something you'd be willing to talk with us a little bit about?
Of course, and I'm really blessed to be in this session because I could have missed it because today is a special day, of course. My past version is done. My future version is not yet there. So the only version that I can shift and clay is the version of now. Now, I would like to say that I'm shifting to a more empowering thought about my versions in the past. Because I don't know my versions in the future, but I know my versions in the past. And I would like to say that I would like to become the most joyful, rooted, and grateful version of myself. Not using anymore the term best, because there is a connotation that if I want to become the best version of myself, it means that today is not the best version or yesterday was worse. And for me, it's like the more rooted, aware, and gratitude and blessed version of myself.
That's
So
a
that's it.
beautiful sentiment, Ollie. Thank you for sharing that because how many of us have been into that meeting saying, I know you have, because I can just tell it. I'm sure Ray has. It's like, are you having your best day ever? And sometimes I just want to smack the person who answers that question and said, there's my answer to your question. No, I'm not trying to be that bold about the whole thing, but Ray, was there something that you wanted to add into Sang's conversation about what we were talking about this whole idea of it? Are we wearing the mask, or are we looking at it as a canvas? Are we going to live our truth, or are we going to continue to color in some other type of identity of who we are?
I think it's a great opportunity to understand, and there's opportunities to learn and to become aware of, okay, am I wearing a mask, and what is the canvas I wish to paint? I love the idea of a canvas that we're going to create or design or express ourselves with, which is awesome. In Years ago, I took a personality course, and it was done by two really smart young people that were talking about, okay, the system says you're probably this kind of personality, but you have to acknowledge that you've been formed by your environments. So you adapt. And Sang mentioned it as well. It's an adaptive process, and Ollie touched on it as well. Is what I am today is not what I was yesterday, or what I will be in the next few weeks or months or years. And I think that's so important, so that if we go from letting go of any mask to start looking at new canvases is a way, I think, to have an open discussion with somebody, because that's about change and adaptation, not rigid, I must be
But what do you
X.
do? But what do you do when somebody doesn't want to play in your new canvas, keeps drawing in the old sketch? I was with someone yesterday who, wanted my help to be able to make a change in their world. But really, all they really wanted me to do was to affirm the same thing that they've been doing over and over again. Right? It's like, oh, help me create my system. My current system is broken. Could you come in and just give me some assistance in setting the broken thing back up again? Right? What do you do when you were saying when people, you present a new canvas to people, a new opportunity to people, and they still approach you in the same way? Can you offer any insight?
You giggle.
Giggle, yeah.
And I say that because this literally happened to me the other day. I was at dinner, and and I could just sense the conversations are not aligning where I'm going, right? And then I even said, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure. I even got home and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's going to be one of the last times I have dinner with that
Yeah.
person and these people for quite some time, right? Because you realize that their mind or whatever is stuck at, like, we're going on this path down Route 66, and they're like, oh, we're going to take a turn. And you're like, yeah, no, still going on Route 66. And so you get the power of choice to decide, how do you want to show up in their lives? You know where they are, but and it's not like you know where they are, but you know how the conversations are going. And it was very interesting because it was coming up in our conversation the other day, and I even brought our topic today up in that conversation. Because this person has a very challenging time modeling and holding themselves accountable, but quick to judge everyone else for what they're not doing. And so it was and I'm just not there anymore. I'm not there in that space. I'm not there to do that. I'm here to help grow. And I kept asking questions, which then in turn irritated this person. And so then, you've really hit something. So I got to back off. But again, this is where my discernment has now come into play, where I get to read and go, oh, okay. And it was very interesting because even yesterday, as I was talking to someone about having different types of conversations, it opened up another conversation for myself, because this individual was like, oh, so you just manipulate them. I was like, yo, that's not what I said. right? So it went completely into a negative space
Right.
where I'm just change the conversation that you want to have, because you have the power to change a conversation and not feed into everyone's negativity.
Well,
And in
let's
that,
unpack something you just said, which is, manipulation, right? So,
yeah,
when we're inviting you to, model the behavior you want to be, if you want to be manipulative, that's still something that you can do. I mean, it's real easy, right? But here's the thing, and I had to learn this the hard way. If you're living creative, if you're willing to do what you, and I really like the idea of the giggle versus the gripe, because guarantee you, yesterday I was not giggling, I was griping. So I'm going to remember the giggle versus the gripe. But where the word I tend to use is orchestrating, and looking back into the idea of incorporating someone's color into what I want to model. Like, I don't expect everyone to align with everything I agree with. That's not the reason why I get up in the morning, to have some kind of, like, well, and manipulation means controlling people, right, Ray? I mean, we're in this, it's interesting to see that there's a difference between modeling what's true for you, and when you're allowing people to um, be themselves as well, but to guide them into, well, okay, I can see that right now you're really super angry, or you're having, like you were saying with your friend, things aren't going well for you right now. How can I adapt? How can I recalibrate? And how can I uh, orchestrate myself and what's happening? But oftentimes, Ray, that's still, a lot of people are conditioned to believe that that's manipulation, whereas I see that as just like your GPS is doing, which is
mhm.
recalibrating. I mean, help us with those terms. Are those helpful, Ray? I mean,
Yeah, I think what's wonderful of what you've all shared here is that if somebody is interested in manipulating, back to what Sang has always said, okay, you have choices. You don't have to be part of that, or you can say, well, that's enough of that. I'm moving on. And I think in one of our previous discussions, we were always talking about the journey we're on doesn't always mean that everyone will be the same with it along that journey. And that's okay, and recognizing that. So, yeah, I think looking at the options that are available, and that's what I love about when Sang and Ollie share stuff. It's, oh wow, well, I wish I would have thought of that, or I can do that now. So that's a new option that's being offered. I've listened, I've considered, and now I can choose
right,
to
Mhm.
say, "Hey, that's a good thing. I like that." And that's to me is like is allowing me to the thinking and the behavior attached to that thinking. So
right.
I didn't quite answer your
You
question, I
did, you
think.
did, but you brought up the thing about choosing, and I want to make sure that people are aware. If you would like to choose to join us in this room for our conversation about what version of you are you modeling, you can actually join us in the room. You can stay in the chat, on the Breakthrough Show Network, on YouTube, or if you're ready, you can just join us. Go to RSS Live, and I'd also like to say, if Jaloki is still listening, you're more than welcome to come back into the circle as well at any time, because we welcome people into the room and into the conversation at any time. So, back to you, saying what's popping up. There was something, I'm sure, that was after what Ray said, right?
Well, there's always a few things. I want to say this. The the manipulation, like, we have to think about the what we've learned in life. And I know I kind of talked about this last week after, and it's like we hear these phrases all the time. Even earlier this morning, Jamie said, act as if, right? We've all heard that phrase, right? And how many of you have heard the phrase, treat others how you want to be treated? We've heard that. We've heard, teach people how to treat you. Right? Then we've heard, do as I say, not as I do. Right? And we hear these things and we hold on to them, just like the definition of insanity. So I got into a tidbit of an argument with a 76-year-old a couple weeks ago about the word insanity, right? And and again, we hear these phrases, were not taught these things, right? We weren't. Who was taught? Were any of you taught how to teach people how to treat your how to teach you how to treat you? Mm-mm. We just, and what did we do? We modeled probably our parents' behaviors, right? Probably how I became my mother, right? And so, but going into that, but going back to insanity, what is the definition of insanity that most people know? Doing something over and over again and getting the same results. Well, ironically, as I looked it up, that is not the definition of insanity. The definition of insanity actually is a medical term that they use in the courtroom, right? And so as I'm saying that that's not the definition of insanity, and they're like, yes, it is. Nope, it's actually was in a movie. It was this. It was that. And we've grown to think that that is the definition. And that's where we've gotten away from a lot of conversations because we want to go with what we think we know that's not actually true in definition terms and things like that.
The litany of, okay, I'm sorry. Was there
No,
more?
that's fine.
The litany of things that we picked up, beliefs that we picked up, right, are littered with things that are all about what we do to other people, right? To somehow, and that's why I love this question, which is, what version of you are you modeling? Recognizing that it's your point of control of like, well, wait, how am I going to respond in this situation, right? And I know what the reaction is if I do this. I know the reaction is what would happen if I did this. I also am aware that what I really want to be in this moment is helpful to a friend, or I really want to make sure I need to steer myself out of this conversation, right? And so that's the version of you that we're asking you to model, because oftentimes we believe that we can change people.
Right. Well, and it takes a lot. It takes a lot to go from the gripe to the giggle.
Right.
Like I'm gonna, it's very. I'm gonna just use that as my reference, because a lot of times we do either one. Sometimes they may catch us at a different time, and we're just not tolerant of whatever behaviors that are happening, right? And then that's again our invitation to go, okay, I know what's happening here. And I've sat at home talking to myself like this. It's very fast. I've even talked on the phone to somebody and I was like, hold on a second, I need a moment. And I go, okay, I know what's happening here. I know this is what's going on. What do I need in this moment? Right? What do I need during their potential crisis that I'm not giggling about?
Well,
And it's very challenging to get there and continuously get there because it may not just be that person. It could be other things that come up. And even yesterday when I was talking to a young lady, I told her she was talking to me about something that her boyfriend brings up all the time. And I said, just shift it a little bit. Just acknowledge that it's true. Reframe the conversation and make it work for you. You don't want to hear him gripe about it. Say, you know what? Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you for caring about me, that you have done so much research. And that's when she was like, oh, so that's manipulation. I was like, no, it's not. You're stating a fact. And if anybody reads the Chris Voss book, he was an FBI investigator. He talks a lot about negotiation in the FBI. He was an FBI negotiator, right? And there's a chapter in the book where he talks about when you state the facts, what are they going to argue with? Right? You repeat what they say. It's their word. They said it. And you have to really make sure that you're really meticulous. And this is where the pausing and slowing down comes into play. And then you shift the conversation. And then as you shift the conversation, and then you continuously do that, not just with one person, but then the next person, it becomes something that you continuously practice in your daily life so that when things do pop up out of nowhere, we can just giggle.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our discussion for the day, right?
Thank you, Ollie. Yep. Never split the difference.
And Ollie, are there people that you know in your daily life who have been the example of how you'd like to be? I mean, can we sometimes borrow the benefit of people that we know and then be able to sort of model that behavior. That's why I still want to kind of bring us back a little bit to this idea of recognizing at certain times we're going to put on different costumes, right? And it's okay because it's our ability to recalibrate and adjust, that is the key to kind of keeping us in resilience. But if we're going to be modeling a version of ourselves, oftentimes, for me at least, I've been able to look at other people that I admire or model and try to see how that behavior. Is there anyone who's? I'm just curious, Ali. I was just going to start with you. Yeah. Is there? What are the qualities of that other person's model?
So first, before answering your question, I had a lot of thoughts about what you said before, so I'm going to giggle. Because it's about sharing that we are not here to change others' life. It's always not easy for ourselves to change our life. So always, I remember always like what is in my control and what is not in my control. That let me. At some point, it's like we are, and I love your metaphor about the painting, about the canvas, because it's about us defining what do we want to create in our own individual personal painting. That it's always work in progress, but at some point it's like, what do I integrate? And it's like a patchwork. It doesn't mean that I will integrate 100% of you, Jamie, because maybe there are some parts that are not resonating with me. What I would like to say is that I'm trying to model first to listen to my inner child, because it comes within. I would like to envision for the next days and weeks and years to become more at peace with my parts and with my inner child, with my guardians that sometimes are blocking me. Like my body is like my ultimate vessel, and at some point my body will give me a message, and do I listen to my body or not? So, but it's there are some persons that I acknowledge in my life that are really transformative within my journey since many years. One of my best friend, I'm not going to quote her name because she doesn't like that I call her name, but and I respect that. But she knows me since 10 years, and she knows the Oli of 10 years ago. And you can giggle, but the Oli of 10 years ago was absolutely not the Oli of today. And bless the old parts of myself that were not awakening at that time. And then the second person is Rachel. Rachel, the founder of New Language Coaching and New Heart, setting up change in the language coaching and the education at school. And she's my mentor, my big sister, and I was meeting her last month on the annual conference in Sitges, Spain. What I would like to say before, because I can talk for hours and hours, but I would like to say that I'm really appreciating these conversations, because it's more about the thing I was thinking was the GPS. Imagine we are for each of us. I could be the GPS of Sang or Ray, and Jamie can be my GPS. The GPS will imagine the GPS and tell me, okay, you want to go there, go left, and it's left, and I constantly go right. The GPS will never say, "Hey, guy, I told you how many times I told you to go left and left." No, recalibrate, recalculate, and
Recalibrate.
it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the GPS is inviting, not judgmental. So that's my share. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I really do appreciate that. Ray, I felt like there was something that you wanted to offer there.
Just a slightly different twist is in regards to what Sang said earlier about shifting the conversation. I was watching a TV show, and it's an interesting sort of contextual shift of the conversation with a relational approach. These guys wanted to go see a mine site. This is in South America, and it's a different environment. So two guys from North America, they show up. The miners are greeting them at their road with guns and machetes. The young guy who's in charge of the, visiting, goes up to them and says, "We wanted to ask your permission Like it's the what comes first, the cart or the horse. They're already on their land, but he says, I wanted to ask your permission to visit your land, but before I do that, I had a question. And they look at him and they say, are you guys hungry? And they all go, what? He says, oh, we've got extra supplies. We've got some candy bars. I know you guys love candy bars. And these guys put down their guns and machetes and go look at the guy's backpack and he said, so then he shifted the conversation. He de-escalated. They were ready for a fight. He did two things. I am here to get your permission. B, I want to be nice. I want to be helpful. And they love the candy bars, by the way. So they said, oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, and
but
again,
that could have been a whole different situation. So the shift of conversation was in an unexpected way, but it was also building a relationship of respect, acknowledgement, and asking permission. Cool. Anyways.
Yeah, no, thank you for unpacking that. That was that unpacking end of it that I wanted to make sure that people got on record, which is, that's what's not manipulation. That's what's recalibrating based on the feedback that you're receiving in the moment, staying true to what your intent, and is going ahead and then using that canvas to paint in what you wanted to be able to convey. Look, I'm not here to be hostile. Would you like some cookies? Right. And we can, that's not everyone in everyday life. We're not always confronted with guns and machetes. But oftentimes we're confronted with people who aren't particularly helpful for us, that we're getting stymied, whatever. I always try to channel my dad in moments like that, where, he always had this really unique ability to see people where they were, right? And so oftentimes, I've been that other person on the phone. If I call the support desk and I want to, get some assistance, and I realize that person at the support desk that answers phone calls all day long is really the recipient of gripes and not giggles. I'll use that language there. So if I can offer some kind of, hey, look, I know, I really appreciate that you guys are a live person, that you're here, and I know that you're here to help me. And begin to sort of have that human exchange, right? It really does open up. It shifts the conversation, and it allows me to not necessarily see that other person as the adversary, the person who isn't, and yes, that doesn't work every time, right? But then you don't have to continue griping about it. You can giggle about it and just say, well, you know what? Let me move on. Let me recalibrate. Let me try another path. Right. I mean, saying, have you ever been frustrated by someone along the lines of what I'm talking about?
No, never.
Giggling.
What you mean? Yeah, of course. And again, by no means am I perfect Patty. Okay. I've learned, and it was actually brought up in a conversation yesterday, because they were like, I've never seen you angry. I've never seen you, when people have talked to you crazy or things like that, you've never gotten out of pocket. And I was just, and I was like, well, don't get me wrong. It happens, right? It's just, I'm a firm believer there's a time and a place for different conversations. And I think, again, back to my old upbringing, right? But being able to diffuse a situation, and I'm going to go quite the opposite right now of Ray, right? There's also the shock factor, right? They were shocked. So they had to go, what do we do with this?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And I'm going to share that shock factor on the other side. I remember going to, again, I always have stories, right? I was going to St. Lucia, and I'm riding on this boat, and it was our taxi. And I remember talking to Dexter on there, and we're at the top of the bow of the boat, and we're talking and this and that. And he's just like, wow, you just have this energy about you. And I was like, I know. Right? Because I know that, but I wasn't being like, I was just like, yeah, I know. I tend to have that everywhere I go. And he was just shocked that I was so honest, right? Because I know that I have this energy. And so that draws people in too when you're honest and they can feel it. And then as he's talking, I turned and he was telling me something, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, Kinda." And I said, "Well, do you need a hug?" And he just paused, right? And was just like, "You would give me a hug?" Like, again, just met the man probably 20 minutes before that when I got on the boat. And I said, "Of course." And he was like, "Yeah?" Right? So it's just this thing though, but we're friends to this day, right? Because of a hug, because someone took the time to say, "Do you need something? Are
Yeah.
you okay?" And you can do that again, any conversation, even the hostile conversations, because I remember saying something, someone was yelling about something one time and they were talking about something not about, they were talking about logistics. I was not talking logistics. I was talking emotions. Emotions and logistics are very different things. And I remember saying, um, just so you know, I'm not talking logistics, I'm talking emotions. And they paused for a second because I realized again, they're talking about logistics, I'm talking about emotions. Then I understood after more of those types of conversations though, our emotional language was completely different. They spoke in emotional logistics. I spoke in emotional feelings.
Right.
So, and then that's when you have to start understanding, why do you keep having a clash, right? Then how do you, being the model, because I'm the one who, again, in my world, I do my best to model the behavior with my close friends and things like that, to go, let's have a conversation.
Right.
Let's talk.
Right.
Let's grow through this.
Right.
And then they carry it on.
Well, something you just said you just said matches what you started this particular conversation with, which is, are you modeling being perfect? Because, that's, oftentimes we want to be seen as human, right? And so what you're doing in that moment, in the boat on St. Lucia, is being able to see someone as human. And oftentimes we're not, I know that parents do this, especially sometimes, it's important sometimes for kids to see their parents failing, right? And to be able to teach people what that is to be human rather than to be perfect, to stay stuck in a role. And just in the same way that when that person on the boat in St. Lucia said, about your energy, you could have stayed in that moment and been what he saw, or you could have chosen in that moment to say, wait a second, I've been giving an invitation, right? And so someone has extended their humanity to me. I think I will extend my humanity back to them, right? And that is that recalibration based on what's happening in your field of energy. There may be some people who are just joining us. And if you are, the conversation today is, what version of you are you modeling? And our hope that through this conversation, as we've been having it today, that, or even if you have some questions that you'd like to ask about it, is that we recognize that the different versions of ourselves are really based on, maybe sometimes they're viewed as costumes, maybe sometimes they're viewed as recalibrations, but that pause and that flexibility keeps you out of deeply conditioned behavior of old models that are no longer, well, I I can't possibly do that because I'm not that type of person. Or, you know what? Used to do that all the time. That used to just trigger me, and I don't have to do that anymore, right? It's that recognition that in that moment you have that opportunity to paint the canvas however you want to, and you're going to base it on what other people are incorporating in your picture, right? Am I missing something? Anyone? Yeah, Raleigh.
Well, and I would say that maybe their colors are not your colors. So it's about indeed the language. that you speak yourself and the language that they speak themselves. Sometimes the language is same, but the locality is different. So I might speak the French of France to someone who is speaking the French of Canada, and we are not understanding each other's because our French are not the same. So I think I love so much what it was shared, especially from you saying, because it's about armor. We all have at certain levels armors around our heart, and at some point it takes one person to crack this armor and to let them know that their presence matters, and that how could I be of help to you, because it takes one person to de-escalate or to open the bridge. And already the intention to open the bridge is already half done over the crossing the bridge, and it's to realize what are their concerns, because in the share about the mine, maybe they were concerned about what are the intentions of these crazy Americans that we don't know, and by the Americans to shift, then they are opening the bridge and the gate so that they can have a common space where they can really discuss in a language that is the same, the language of the heart. So thank you so much for your shares.
Well, thank you, Ollie. The phrase, saying keeps going through my mind of how much we're conditioned to. I keep thinking of the Army slogan now:
Be all you can be.
be all that you can be. And there's what most people do when they hear that is that it's a huge responsibility to have to carry, right? And can't you just be who you are? I mean, is the version of who you'd like to model the version that says, you know what, I can be who I am right now. I can embrace all the different possibilities, but I don't have to be superhuman, right? I don't
Right.
I don't have to be like I'm in control of every interaction that I have. What we're inviting is that sort of, use the pause, see what's in front of you, and adjust accordingly without losing yourself. That's the really important part of it, is don't lose yourself in that adjusting. Yes?
Yes, because the big first thing that came to mind, my question would be back to someone is, what if you are being who you are? What if you are being everything you can be, and you don't realize that you've trickled in something from the outside to influence what you're doing differently? I tell my daughter this a lot when she's on stage, because I'm like, just like Dexter, when I had a conversation with Dexter, it's like, you make people's dreams come true every day people get on this boat. And he didn't see it that way, right? He saw it as a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to connect with people and say, you can like reframe it for them. Now he's been like, it's like a whole light in him shifted. And it's just it's one conversation that shifted a whole world for him.
Yeah.
And to be able to say, you can do this, you can be anything. And I've always told, people, parents will tell their kids, you can be anything you want. And then they go, but not an astronaut.
Not an
Right.
actress, right?
Yeah, but not that, right? They'll say those things. And again, going back to parenting for myself, I wanted my kids to experience and explore so they could find out who they were
Right.
as they were growing up within the constraints of parenting, right? And, things like that. So when my daughter's on stage, she's a performer and a dancer and things like that. And so when she's on stage, I remind her a lot that you're on the stage, people are watching you. You never know who's in that audience. You never know what little girl or little boy is looking up to you. You have no idea. So every time I see her on that stage, I'm watching her energy, and it's like her energy to me, of course I'm biased, but her energy to me is just so out of this world. And it's because I've seen where she's been and I've seen where she's gone and I know where she's going.
Right.
But just being able to help people be all they can be,
Mm-hmm.
right? By helping them shed those masks, by being that safe, honest, sacred space where they can come talk and have conversation, and you gently push them to be better, but they don't know that they're, they're adaptive. They're going to pull some of your habits, some of your things that you're doing, some of your conversations. And to me, that's the most magical part is if Ollie were to come back and say, like Ollie and I have met each other almost a year ago when we were in a group, and Ollie was always so kind every time he came into the room. And then Ollie reminded me of my own gifts last year when Ollie told me I was a sanctuary. Right? Because I love his wordplay, and how he just always brought words to us. And so when he said that, I began to think about all of my relationships and all the things and what I provide for people, and I have become the change I wanted to be because I wanted at least one person. I never want anybody to be by themselves in anything they go through. And so I always made sure that I was a person they could always come talk to. There's no judgment. There's no hard conversations there in terms of like, I'm going to beat you down with it. Let's have a conversation. What's going on?
And
So,
certainly that model of what you wanted to be, this is that ability to sort of reapply, to reacquaint, to reorient, and it is a communication link, right? I need to yes, be the change you want to be in the world, but also recognize that in order for that to be, it's something that you have to model. It's something that you have to adjust. And because, I mean, unless I know there are people that actually get up. I know for people to realize this, but there are people who get up in the morning just simply out of their own misery to disrupt and cause havoc and do all sorts of hurtful things to the world. And so we're not trying to say that just you should recalibrate around someone's drama and always just giggle at it. Sometimes you just need to necessarily remove yourself from it because that is the appropriate behavior that you want to model. I would not want to stay around and contend with something that isn't willing to, or someone that isn't willing to adjust, right? And so I need to make sure I walk away. I'm not shutting the door, but my model is this is not appropriate behavior right now. I'm going to be stepping away. Ray, is there something that emerges? I saw you nodding with saying.
Oh, so much of what's saying and you and Ollie shared is that we're all Dexters.
yeah.
We're all looking for these opportunities to receive them or to give them. And I love the fact that you reached out to an individual, a human being, and opened a space for conversation. And it's the smallest things. So we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be superstars at what we do, but just to recognize that creates the shift or the connection with others in the world. And a small example for that for me was I was on a project doing some audiovisual work, and our role was to set up the space. The client would come in. It was complicated, and it was a very short time frame. So within the hotel, I asked one of the support people. I said, "Hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you help?" And I says, I know you know where everything is and what's happening. Just give me an idea." And the guy looked at me and said, "Wow, like you're asking me to help, but you're not telling me to. You got to help me or fix this." Unbeknownst to me, the client was in the back of the room watching our interaction. And so the guy says, "Yeah, I'll get the key. I know you need to talk to the engineer in the back. I'll call him." And I'm going, I didn't know that. That would have taken hours. So all of a sudden, he's interacting with me. I'm showing him interest in him as a person, saying, "Hey, I know your job is tough, but you know what's going on." And it made the whole system easier. The person in the back of the room says, "I'm going to ask that you be on the next project." And I said, "Why?" I says, he said, "The way you interact with people," he says, "we need to help each other." He says, you didn't treat that guy like he was a nobody." He said, you said what you know and what you can do." And he came back like later on, says, "How's it going?" back to
Right.
SAG. Like all of a sudden he was interested in how I was coping because I looked at him as his job was important to the whole process. So I think we have those opportunities. We're all Dexters.
Right. And
Absolutely.
as we're wrapping up our time together on this Sunday around this question, Ray's admonition is that, am I using the correct, Ray's advice here?
Ollie would know that.
But
Of course, rays of light.
there you go. Is we really want people to be able to, like, I want everyone to think a little bit about what they'd like to offer some of the people who are listening today as far as something that they could carry forward in the week. And for me, it would be to look back in those times when you have seen that some little small thing that you did, which was true to yourself, changed the dynamic of an interaction. And it is often just through the simple gesture of being you that sometimes that happens. So my invitation right now is for people to look back and recognize that there have been times when that shift happens, when you were modeling the correct behavior. And I'm just inviting you to go ahead and look backwards. I don't always tell people to look backwards, but to borrow the benefits from that experience and have a time for reflection on what was true about that. Does anybody else have a tip or a suggestion for people as they move into their week? Yeah, Ollie.
Giggling more. We need to giggle more.
Giggle more.
To have fun. Because of course there are things that are serious, but being too serious is not helping either. So at some point it's giggling more seriously, checking about our energy, what we've done during the last hours or days. Are we showing an example of who we want to be or become? It's important to have these kind of check-ins, and more I advance in time, more and more I realize that if it's not planned, it's lost, because later means never. So it's about planning these moments of introspection, so that we can truly become the most joyful, and I was rewarding, the most joyful and rooted version of ourselves.
Well, thank you for that birthday flavored gift from you for this week. Raymond, anything that you already had a great one, so I'm not asking you to come up with a second one.
I'm just going to reinforce what Sang and Ollie came up with, the 2 G's.
Right.
Less griping, more giggling.
There you go. And
Gio.
Yeah.
Oh, a G in it.
So that leaves us with you, Sang, to anchor us for this week.
Yeah. Of course. Well, mine always takes you back, way back, right? Whether you are a parent or have been parented, okay? I want you to think about the things that, my invitation is for you to think about the things that you have told your kids to do and you didn't do them yourselves, right? And then they've seen you, and then they're probably internally questioning because they feel like they can't question, because I know that's what it was for me. When I was growing up, my parents would say one thing, completely do the opposite. Yet when I did it, I got in trouble because it was do as I say, not as I do. And so paying attention to that, and even in work life, right? We're asking a lot of other people sometimes, but we're not doing the same things. It was even recently in a conversation I was having at an event, and they were like whining and griping and complaining about something. And I was like, are we doing the same thing? Right? Like, so just really having that honest question and conversation with that reflection mixed in would be super, super helpful, I think.
Well, and my invitation is, well, first, I want to also say thanks to all of you for participating in this conversation, as always. And the invitation is always every Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time, we gather. None of us are experts in the particular question that we're asking, but we are all voices that can offer our perspectives and hopefully shape some things that emerge. And this has been a wonderful example of that emergence of making sure that we focus less on the gripe and more towards the giggle. But again, I invite you back here next week. I also want you to, if you have not already, to subscribe to the Breakthrough Show Network on YouTube, if you'd like to. There's some excellent programming there. And if you want to connect with us we're going to be doing a really interesting experiment this summer where we're going to expand a little bit about what we do on Sunday mornings to a whole entire summit built around inquiry, exploration, and experimentation. So we'll be having that open circle summer summit coming up at the end of July. So if you want to learn more about that, you can just drop us a line at RiseandShineSundays@gmail.com. We'll be sharing more about that as the weeks evolve. So to my esteemed friends and gathered around the room this morning, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will look forward to having you back with us next Sunday for Rise and Shine Sundays, where we wake up to what's emerging. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.